Hello my gorgeous friends of Webflow, it's your friendly neighborhood Francesco from Supasaido here. Have you ever tried to add inner borders to a grid in Webflow only to realize there's no built-in way to add them without relying on complex workarounds and combo classes? Well, you're not alone, and today we're going to fix that. In this tutorial, I'll show you how to use a simple combo of gap and background color to create clean, consistent inner borders between grid items. Whether you're working with images, text elements, or even CMS collections. And along the way, we'll tackle all the little issues that tend to pop up. Handling inconsistent aspect ratios, fixing layout glitches on smaller breakpoints, and making sure your solution is 100% accessible, even when using empty grid cells as placeholders. By the end, you'll have a robust, responsive layout that looks great and plays nice with assistive technologies too. If you're looking forward to it as much as I am, stick around, and if you find my videos helpful and want to support my work, hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. But now, if you're ready, let's dive in! Let's kick things off with a layout that's visually a bit more interesting than usual, but still incredibly simple. Inside our section, we've got the usual structure: a main container, a section content wrapper, and then a div block. We gave it the class grid, set its display property to grid, and defined 3 columns and 3 rows with a default gap of 16 pixels. Inside this grid, we've placed a few static images directly from the assets panel. All these images share the same class, grid_image, although we haven't applied any styles to it just yet. Now, what we want to do is add inner borders between these images. Borders that are visually distinct from the background of the section, have a consistent thickness, and act as dividers between each image. This is a quick and easy trick, just a few simple steps, though we'll need to adjust a couple of things along the way, especially due to the non-uniform aspect ratio of the images and some responsive layout concerns that may even affect accessibility. But more on that later. We'll get there step by step. So, first thing first, let's define the thickness of those inner borders. To do that, we'll use the gap property of our grid. Instead of the default 16 pixels, we'll reduce it to just 1 pixel. Now, to actually give color to those borders, all we need to do is set a background color on the grid itself. Let's pick something bright and obvious, like a yellow-orange tone, so we can really see the effect in action. And voila! It already looks like the images are separated by thin colored lines, except not quite. Because our images have different aspect ratios, the visual separation gets messed up. Some images stretch more than others and the spacing isn't consistent. But you probably already know where we're headed with this. Let's fix that. Select one of the images, they all share the same class anyway, and set both width and height to 100%. This ensures each image stretches to fill the entire grid cell it belongs to. Then, under the size section, click on More Size Options and change the fit property to Cover. This forces each image to fill the cell entirely without distortion, while preserving its original aspect ratio. Perfect! Now the grid has clean, consistent inner borders, exactly what we were going for. Before we move on to the responsive and accessibility issues I hinted at earlier, let's look at one more example. This time, instead of images, we'll use text elements inside the grid. And here we are with the second section, a grid that contains text elements instead of images. The structure is exactly the same. We've got our section, the same main container, then the familiar section content wrapper, and finally a div block with the class grid. And since we're reusing the same grid class we applied earlier, this grid still has the golden yellow background color, just like the one we used for the image layout. But here's the key difference. Instead of images, we're now dealing with plain text elements. And since text blocks don't come with a background color by default, or rather their color is set to transparent, the yellow grid background remains fully visible behind them, which totally breaks the effect we want. So how do we fix it? It only takes one extra step. All these text elements share a class called grid_text. We just need to give them a background color that matches the color of the section or wrapper that contains the grid. In our case, the background of the surrounding area is white. So we simply select any of the text elements and assign a white background color to the class grid_text. Boom! Problem solved. Now each grid cell looks visually separated again, thanks to the contrasting inner borders, even though we're working with text instead of images. So far, so good. But now it's time to address the real issue: responsiveness, and as a direct consequence, accessibility. We'll look at that next. And after that, we'll go through one final example, a dynamic version of this layout where the grid items are not static elements, but rather pulled from a CMS collection. To understand the issue with responsiveness, we don't even need to go down to the tablet breakpoint, because the layout still works fine there, even with 3 columns. But if we jump over to the landscape breakpoint, things start to break down a bit, especially in the text-based grid. 3 columns feel a little too much, and the layout starts to look unbalanced. So what's the obvious fix? We simply remove one of the columns to make better use of the horizontal space. Select the grid, enter edit mode, reduce the number of columns from 3 to 2, click done, and that's it. But now if we scroll to the end of the grid, we see a problem. There's an empty cell, a blank space at the bottom right corner of the grid. Why? Because we no longer have enough items to fill all the cells. The same thing happens in the text version. And yes, I did it on purpose so we can troubleshoot it together. What's happening is that we've got an odd number of elements trying to fit into a grid that now has 2 columns. The final cell remains visibly empty, and the background color of the grid shows through, ruining the visual consistency. So, how do we fix it? From a responsiveness point of view, it's actually very simple. We add a new div block inside the grid and give it a class like grid_placeholder. Then we assign it the same background color as the area around the grid. In the case of our grid, the color is white, so we apply a white background to the placeholder. Boom! Visual issue resolved. We can even copy and paste the same placeholder into the other grid, the one with the images, and if we go into preview mode, everything seems to work nicely. Of course, this layout isn't perfectly symmetrical anymore, but from a visual and responsive standpoint, we've removed the awkward empty space. But now there's a new side effect we have to deal with. If we go back to the desktop breakpoint, we notice something strange. There's now a visible yellow strip below the grids. Why? Because on desktop, and even on tablet, we still have a grid with 3 columns. Adding that placeholder as a 10th item forces the grid to create a new row, pushing content downward and revealing the yellow background. Lucky for us, the fix is simple. Select the grid placeholder and set its display property to none. That hides it completely on desktop and tablet, and actually on all other breakpoints as well. So now switch back to the landscape breakpoint and make sure the display property is set back to block so it remains visible where we need it. If we go even farther down to the mobile portrait breakpoint, we might want to take another step and reduce the number of columns to just 1. which would make the layout more readable on small screens. But there's a catch. Our placeholder is still visible here, and that's because of cascade inheritance, or what we might call the cascade down principle. In simpler terms, since the placeholder is visible in the landscape breakpoint, it will remain visible in all breakpoints below, unless we explicitly hide it again. Now, most of the time, this isn't a big deal. After all, the div is completely empty, so it likely won't show up at all in the published site or even take up space. But just to be safe, we can go ahead and set its display property to none in the mobile portrait breakpoint too. Problem solved? Almost. We still have one last issue, and this time it's not something we can see with our eyes. It's an accessibility issue. Something that screen readers or other assistive technologies might detect, and something that could impact the experience for users who rely on those tools to navigate the web. So, what exactly is the issue? Let's find out. It's not something you can see in the visual layout, but it still matters a lot, especially for users who rely on assistive technologies like screen readers. And here's the problem. We've added a div block inside the grid placeholder, and it's completely empty. That might not seem like a big deal visually, but from an accessibility perspective, this can create confusion. Why? Because screen readers don't just skip over empty elements by default. They might interpret that div as a meaningful element, especially since it's part of a content structure like a grid. This could lead to a poor experience, as users navigating via keyboard or screen reader might encounter an empty element with no context or purpose. So, how do we fix it? The solution is simple. Select the grid placeholder, go to the element settings panel, and under custom attributes, add a new attribute. Name aria-hidden. Value true. This tells assistive technologies to completely ignore that element. It won't be announced, it won't receive focus, it becomes invisible to accessibility tools, which is exactly what we want in this case, since the placeholder has no semantic meaning. One thing to keep in mind, this attribute is not tied to the class, so it won't automatically apply to every instance of the grid placeholder. So don't forget, if you've added another placeholder in the second grid, the one with text elements, you'll need to manually add aria-hidden true there as well. And with that, our accessibility concerns are fully addressed. Now it's time to move on to the final example, one where the grid items are not static at all, but dynamically generated from a CMS collection. And here we are with the final section, the most dynamic one. This time, instead of using static content, we're working with a CMS collection. As usual, we've got our section, main container, and section content wrapper. But now, instead of a static grid, we've added a collection list connected to a very simple collection in the CMS. The collection includes the default name and slug fields, plus two custom fields, an image field and a plain text field called aria-hidden, which will help us solve our accessibility issue. More on that in a second. Let's look at how everything is set up. The collection list wrapper has the class list-wrapper, but no styles are applied to it. The collection list itself uses the same grid class we've been using all along, and that's why you still see the gold inner borders. Each collection item uses the class list-item, again with no particular styles. And each image inside the list item has the grid image class, the same one from our first example. So far, so good. Everything seems to work. Except, if we go to the landscape breakpoint, we run into a familiar issue. There aren't enough items to fill out the last row of the grid, so we get a visible gap. The grid background peeks through again. Now, with a static grid, we'd simply add a placeholder div. But CMS doesn't let us add static elements inside a collection list, at least natively. So what do? We add a placeholder item to the collection, one without an image. But now we hit three new problems. One, the placeholder shows at the top instead of the bottom, due to automatic sorting in Webflow. Two, since it has no image, the background of the grid remains visible in that cell. Three, we run into the same accessibility issue as before. How do we fix that? Let's start from the accessibility issue this time. And this is where the aria-hidden field we added to the CMS comes into play. We'll use it for the same exact purpose as before. To apply the aria-hidden equals true attribute to the placeholder item. So assistive technologies will ignore it. Now, because this is a CMS field, it gets added to every item in the collection, not just a placeholder. So here's what we do. For every normal item, set aria-hidden to false. For the placeholder, set it to true. Back in the Webflow designer, let's select the list item, go to the element settings panel, and under custom attributes, let's add a new one. Name aria-hidden. And let's bind its value to the CMS field aria-hidden. Now every item will dynamically get the correct attribute. Real items with images will get aria-hidden false. Placeholder without image will get aria-hidden true. And with that, accessibility issue is solved. Next problem, the visible background in the empty cell. To fix that, we go back into the list item, add a div block, and give it the same class as before, grid_placeholder. To make sure it fills the entire cell, manually set its width and height to 100%. But this causes another issue, that div blocks is now inside every item, not just the placeholder, so we need to control its visibility. But conditional visibility comes to the rescue. We select the grid placeholder inside the list item, go to element settings, add a condition. Show this element only when the image field is not set. Alternatively, you could also bind it to aria-hidden equals true, but checking for the absence of an image is more direct and foolproof. Click save and you'll see the placeholder only appears in the last item, the one without an image. To double check, try changing its background color temporarily. It should only be visible in that cell. Once confirmed, switch it back to white. And finally, the last issue, sorting. Right now, the placeholder is still showing up at the top of the list. Let's fix that. If you don't need a specific sort order, just select the list wrapper, go to the sort order settings, click the plus icon to add a new sort rule, choose the aria-hidden field and sort alphabetically. Since false comes before true, the placeholder will automatically be pushed to the end of the list. But what if you do need a specific sort order, like sorting items by their name? No problem, just do this. After the sort rule we've just added, add your primary sort. For example, name, reverse alphabetical. Webflow will first sort items by aria-hidden, pushing the placeholder to the end, and then it will sort the items according to your chosen criteria. And that's it. We've handled dynamic content, layout consistency, accessibility, and even custom sorting. To wrap things up, let's take a final look at the entire setup across all breakpoints, from desktop all the way down to mobile portrait, and confirm that everything is working just as expected. And that's it for today's tutorial. You've just learned how to build a responsive, clean and accessible grid layout in Webflow. complete with inner borders, image scaling, and smart placeholders that solve both visual and semantic issues. We even tackled the trickier part, making it all work with CMS content, while keeping full control over responsiveness and accessibility, with tools like aria-hidden, conditional visibility, and dynamic sorting. Everything you saw today is part of a fully clonable Webflow project, so feel free to explore it, break it, rebuild it, and make it your own. And hey, if you enjoyed this breakdown and want to go even deeper into responsive layout tricks or CMS workflows, check out the other videos on my channel. More are on the way. And if you found this helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more Webflow tips and tricks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Matane!